Okay, what's going on everyone? Doc here, and today I want to talk about Red Guardian. So, Red Guardian is a really interesting champion. I haven't done a content creator program review video in a while. I apologize about that. Just trying to make sure I finished up school and all of that. Last one I did was on Terex, and he was kind of boring. I did a little bit of review of Mole Man before that. He was kind of bad. I did test out Sorcerer Supreme and Storm Pyramid X. Did a little bit on stream with Black Widow Deadly Origin. Red Guardian is probably the most interesting out of all of them. He plays a little bit kind of like Cap Infinity War. They both have opportunities for high damage, and they both have a ton of utility. Whereas Cap has Petrify, Weakness, Armor Break, that kind of stuff, and also being able to remove unstoppable effects on the opponent. Red Guardian can remove unstoppable effects from the opponent. He has a really easy to use perfect block that's also reliable. Cap is just a good perfect block % chance. Red Guardian is when you have a high durability on a shield, you know you're going to get a perfect block. Red Guardian can also stop evades with his slow debuff, which is nice and something Cap can't do. In general, though, I do compare them a lot in this video. I can see someone who doesn't have Cap or really doesn't enjoy playing him really finding Red Guardian to be a fantastic option for their team. And I can even see someone who does have Cap and likes him finding Red Guardian is a bit of a specialist alternate option to Cap Infinity War as well. So as always with CCP review videos, I'm not associated with Kabam Marvel in any way. They just provide me and other content creators with the champion for a brief time for testing and video making purposes for you guys. So today I'm going to go over all of his abilities, his synergies, and then do a little bit of gameplay as well. I'm mostly focused on kind of his best damage rotation in this video. I talk a little bit about his utility, but sadly I didn't really collect a lot of gameplay of actually using his utility, specifically the slow debuff was the big one. But yeah, he does have that, and I do kind of mention it throughout the video as kind of something he has, but I just want to mention that first as something I know this video is kind of lacking and I need to show up as well as I should have, but in general, Red Guardian is still a really, really good champion. I did kind of want to show that off as well. So let's get started. So Red Guardian's Ablative Shield kind of acts as his passive, and it's where most of his utility comes from. First off, he can't gain buffs, which is a really interesting utility. He can't benefit from synergies like Heimdall's, but you get to play a little bit more passive around nodes like Icarus. This Kamala Khan had her little passive nullify that would give her power gain. So she never got that at all throughout this fight. And that's probably one of his most interesting utilities, that he's kind of the first and possibly he's the only champion right now. Possibly they'll never add this to another champion again, but it's a really interesting little piece of utility I can see being super helpful against certain things. So every time that a buff attempts to trigger, he instead gains +1 durability for the shields. That's what you see happening in this clip here. I'm just using dexterity. You never see it triggering, and I keep gaining +1 durability. So it caps at 10 durability normally, but a SIG ability makes it go up to 15, which is why you see it at up to 14 here. So every blocked hit removes 1 durability, but again, the SIG ability changes that. I'll talk about that next, actually. So each stack of durability increases perfect block chance by 5%, and perfect blocks will always reduce incoming damage to 0. So getting his perfect block is not too difficult. Right here you see I just do it twice off of Kang's SP2 and take 0 damage off of both of those hits. This was close encounters, so all the damage I took was just from that node. No damage on his own. So in addition to that, while the shield is intact, he can block heavy and unblockable attacks. So Cap Marvel right here goes in for a heavy attack, and I get to block it and parry her. He also gains increased block efficiency by doing this. Blocking a heavy or unblockable attack reduces shield durability to 0. And all incoming attacks can be blocked. So when he reaches 0 durability, which you see happen here, the shield goes on cooldown and it becomes fractured, which is going to place a debuff on Cap Marvel that I'll talk about when I talk about the SP2. Because in most of his Red Guardian's rotations, you want to use his SP2 to trigger the trauma debuff on purpose. And every time that it goes on cooldown, the cooldown increases by 300%, so eventually it becomes a really long cooldown. So his SIG ability does a lot of things, and I wouldn't call it entirely necessary, but it does have a ton of really helpful utility for him. So first off, it increases the maximum durability of the shield by +1 for every 40 SIG levels. So at SIG 200, I'm getting the +5. So you can see well-timed blocks have a 100% chance to prevent durability loss, which is one of the biggest things here. So I don't lose as much durability as I normally would in a normal fight, which means that I'm not going to accidentally trigger the fracture by accident, which would be really bad because then the trauma debuff hits, and I really want to get the trauma debuff on the SP2. In addition to that, SIG also gives trauma, slow, and vulnerability debuffs 30% longer duration, which just helps with keeping them up with his heavy attack more often. I'll talk about his heavy attack in a second as well, but really his SIG ability, similar to Cap Infinity War, Max SIG helps it out. You get the increased maximum durability, which can also increase your damage during SP2, as I didn't mention before. But you also have the well-timed blocks is by far the biggest thing, because you can just block parry every time and not lose that durability. So his heavy attack, you gain increased attack for each unique debuff on the opponent, and it's also going to refresh all slow, vulnerability, and trauma debuffs on the opponent. So on Red Guardian's SP1, on the activation, it's going to inflict the slow debuff. Doesn't actually need to hit. You can see it activates before it actually lands, and you don't actually have to hit the opponent with it for the slow debuff to get on them. Lasts for 12 seconds, and it's going to reduce the ability to see the opponent's unstoppable and evade effects by 100%. So an immediate evade counter and an unstoppable counter. So evade is something Cap Infinity War really can't do as well, adding to Red Guardian's utility over him. Slow debuff can also help in cases where, especially when they trigger unstoppable from nodes and that kind of stuff. If you don't have the ability to get a kinetic charge with Cap Infinity War, you're out of luck. Red Guardian can do it aggressively. So while the opponent is suffering from slow, Red Guardian also gets a 25% increased power rate, which is really good. It's why I always use SP1 to start. 25% increased power rate means you can get to your other two specials a lot faster, which is where he really gets his damage from. So Red Guardian's SP2, this is where the damage comes from. So on activation, if the shield is intact, you gain increased attack rating, so you want the shield active. If it strikes the opponent, the shield becomes fractured. So this is where you're going to be purposely triggering the fracture. And you're also going to get, for each stack of durability, increased attack rating for each hit, and during the attack, any debuffs inflicted last 100% longer. So like I said, I want to talk about on fracture here, because it's most important here. So on fracture, you inflict the stun debuff for 1.9 seconds. It's going to last twice as long, again, from the SP2. And you can inflict that trauma debuff. So it lasts for 3 seconds on all fractures. But with the SP2, it's going to last for 6, plus 30% from his SIG ability. So you're getting a lot more duration. It's a lot easier to keep up. Now, the trauma debuff causes each hit to deal an additional 70% of the damage recently dealt as burst physical damage. You can stack up to 3. I never get it to 3. I only got it to 2 right here. But you can see the second hit dealt, let's see here. First hit dealt an extra 2k, 17,000 on the crit, with an extra 25,000 physical damage. Obviously, this is going to be decreased if the opponent has a high physical resistance. More champions have a high physical resistance and have energy resist, but still, this is absolutely insane damage. If it doesn't crit, it's obviously a lot less, but dealing an extra 140% damage, because it's 70% per trauma debuff. You can deal 210 technically, but I've never actually seen it. I was never able to get that myself, but still some insane damage with 2 trauma debuffs here. So Red Guardian's SP3, it is such a long SP3 animation, but it's pretty necessary to his max damage rotation. So if the shield is active, its durability is set to max, and if it's fractured, its cooldown ends immediately. That's really important. As the cooldown gets longer, you really want to be able to end the cooldown immediately like this. Inflicts a stun debuff for 1.9 seconds, and it's going to inflict a non-stacking vulnerability debuff for 20 seconds. So vulnerability is going to increase Red Guardian's critical damage rating when he's hitting the opponent. In addition to that, it's a debuff, which means that all of his abilities that benefit from having unique debuffs on the opponent, this is yet another one. So Red Guardian Synergies. He has 5 of them. Only 3 actually affect him, but the other 2 on the right are really helpful for those champions. So with Black Widow Deadly Origin, when charging a heavy attack, Red Guardian becomes passively unstoppable for 0.6 seconds and has a 10-second cooldown. Kind of similar to Man-Thing, but it's locked behind a synergy and it has a longer cooldown as well. With Sabretooth, when the shield is fractured, gain an indefinite passive fury, 10% attack until the shield is repaired. This can be helpful because it can kind of increase your damage when the shield is down, when you don't have perfect blocks, so you can kind of really play aggressive there. It's also nice as the more SP2s you use, the more you fracture it, the longer that fury is going to last because your shield's going to be down for longer. With Omega Red, 50% damage from incoming attacks while the shield is at max durability. So this one is pretty much just nice for if you need to perfect block a special or something like that, because you are still going to be losing durability while it's at max if you don't get a perfect block. So it's only helpful for every little once in a while. For Abomination and Rhino, though, Rhino starts the fight with the passive Fury, increasing his attack rating, and he also places a slow debuff on the opponent. Abomination gets a 50% chance to inflict poison, dealing 70% of modified attack. It's insane. I'm sure you guys have already seen gameplay of it out there. I didn't actually record any myself, sadly, but I used my 6-star Abomination, and he was doing insane poison damage. Phenomenal for him, and it makes Rhino a slight unstoppable counter, but doesn't last for that long, only 20 seconds. So, Living Steel Curtain with Colossus and Unstoppable Colossus. Unstoppable Colossus gets 200% longer duration on his personal furies, and they gain an additional 10% chance to attack. And you can also land a heavy attack to pause all personal furies until another is gained, which is really cool. And then for Colossus, probably one of the weakest of Colossus, kind of really heavy synergies. Activating any special attack has a 50% chance to trigger an unstoppable buff, which I guess can be nice for stuff like Can't Stop, Won't Stop, giving Colossus the ability to trigger unstoppable and deal extra damage during that. But those don't affect Red Guardian at all. They are nice for those champions. In the gameplay, as always, I really didn't run Red Guardian with any synergies. I didn't think any of them was super necessary, and I wanted to kind of show them at his base as usual. So, top into the gameplay now. So now for some gameplay. As always, going to start off in Act 5, Chapter 4, Quest number 1, the Vitality Path. And I've already skipped over the first fight because that one was a little bit longer. I didn't quite have his rotation down at that point. And I don't use his best rotation in these fights. Essentially what I'm doing here, I always use the SP1 first. Always. That 25% increased power rate really helps out a ton. And I really want to be able to use other specials faster. Shouldn't have gone for the heavy attack there. I was trying to refresh that slow debuff and it got hit low. But I'm going to be just fine on 7%. His perfect block is great. He can survive a lot with that. And his block efficiency in general, even if it's not a perfect block, is really good. So like I said, the slow debuff, got to get that up. Even though she doesn't have any unstoppable, it's just about a 25% increased power rate. And I'm just going to go for SP2s mostly here. Because some really big hits with the trauma there. You saw a 6k followed up by a 4k with the extra 70% physical damage. With some really, really good damage there. And now I'm just going to keep using a heavy attack, trying to refresh that trauma. Go right into another SP2, and that finishes her off. Because now I dealt an extra 140% physical damage. That's kind of like the fast version of his rotation. Just using that one SP1, just because it gives that increased power rate. And then from there going on to the SP2s. Normally though, in any non-Act 5 fight, so in the Act 6 stuff after this, I will show off his full rotation, which is SP1, SP3, and then as many SP2s as you can do. Maybe 2 SP2s and then an SP3, depending on his shield durability, that kind of stuff, and the cooldown for that. Because like I said, in his SP3, you want to be able to use that to refresh the shield duration, because it doesn't last, or because the cooldown gets really, really long the more it goes down. So this Voodoo has increased physical resist. That 8k crit would have dealt an extra 70% of that, if he didn't have all that extra physical resist, so it was kind of decreasing that trauma damage. You saw a 3k crit only did an extra 300 there, so not dealing too much extra damage here, but still showing off a little bit more of his sustainability. I didn't do a great job showing off his utility here. It is kind of hard to show off without going against someone like the champion, which there's no good champions in Act 5 because he wasn't out there, and I didn't want to go against 626 champion, go all the way there, and then just die after 10 minutes. This is only an R3, and early Act 6 is as far as I'll bring him into. Speaking of Act 6, I'll show some off here. 621 life cycle. As normal, I like showing off this one. So right here, I'm going to go right about there, use my SP1, and I'll just need to keep that up, keep that slow debuff up with a couple heavy attacks. Heavy attacks, dealing the extra damage, they deal a really good amount of damage, especially when you're starting to refresh multiple traumas, especially because most of the time I had the other debuffs up at the same time. His raw damage in itself, it's not too bad. I saw a 4k right there, which is really, really good. But really is all about that extra trauma damage. Spamming the SP3, got it off there. His SP3 is such a long animation. I do like the animation, but it is way too long for my taste. I prefer a little bit more of a faster one, but I generally don't use my champion's SP3s anyways. Should have gone right in there, because you can normally get 2 heavy attacks off during that stun, but I only got 1 off. Just 2 off for a little bit of extra damage. So 2k medium crit without any sort of buffs there, which is good. And yeah, I didn't really get to show off his heavy buff, no buff utility as well, which is really nice. Right there, massive crit on the SP2. I think both hits crit there, dealt a ton of damage. And I did lose the trauma debuff, wasn't able to refresh it. That's alright though. You can see the shield. After 1 SP2, the durability is already back up, but after that next SP2, the downtime would have been pretty long. So same life cycle, just a different path. This is the full Kamala Khan one. So like I said, if I were triggering dexterity, she would have a chance to nullify them. The Pilfered Regeneration, it's the name of the node. But because I'm not ever triggering any buffs, she's not going to ever steal it, and she's not going to gain that extra power gain, which is great. This one also shows off, I use my heavy counter to a lot of her abilities quite often, which is nice, especially because if they're stun immune for whatever reason, he obviously doesn't work on debuff immune, which is kind of a downside. All of his utility goes away. Can't get rid of unstoppables. Can't get rid of evading as well. That is a little bit of a problem, but you can heavy counter a lot. His heavy does have some really good reach. So again, the rotation, I've done my SP1. Now I'm going in for my SP3 to place that vulnerability. Having the vulnerability definitely helps with crit damage, but it's not really necessary. I mostly just use it for that extra debuff. Should have used the heavy attack way closer. And yeah, the SP3 also refreshes the duration of the... gets rid of the cooldown, as I said multiple times, which is probably its most helpful thing in addition to placing the vulnerability. But yeah, his abilities all kind of work in tandem really well together, and I did enjoy playing him quite a bit, about as much as I enjoyed playing Cap Infinity War. So I think at rank 5 I would find him a lot more enjoyable and a lot more helpful than I did at rank 3. Definitely be able to show off a lot more in those cases. Somehow I refreshed the trauma there. I didn't think that I would, but I got lucky there. So I dealt an extra 6k and a 4k crit. No crits on the SP2. He has a pretty low crit rate and a low crit damage. Not that really matters since the trauma is going to be dealing most of it, but I'm able to keep up those 2 traumas quite a while here, and possibly to the end of the fight. Shouldn't have gone in for the heavy counter there. I should have taken it back up there. She did get 1 regen from the life cycle, but that hit crit for an extra 5k physical damage. Plus on top of what is a 3k crit, I think. And my recording gets a little wonky here, but luckily it's fixed by the next fight. And the next fight, just the last one, 626 Angela. This is the furthest in that I wanted to go. This is just the first fight of the 626 champion quest. Like I said, I didn't want to go all the way in against the champion. And again, not running any synergies. Haven't used any synergies at all through any of the gameplay. I never do unless I specifically show off one of the synergies. None of them are super helpful for him. But this Angela fight is just kind of a long one, and again, just shows off kind of his best damage rotation with him. Just kind of keeping up those debuffs with his heavy attack quite often, and using his SP3 followed by a ton of SP2s. Yeah, his utility I didn't find as super helpful. I think if I brought him into a couple other stuff more specifically, I definitely could have gotten a little bit more utility-wise, but I kind of just focus on his damage. He does have a lot of utility, especially, I think being able to stop evade champions is probably his biggest, just for that slow debuff. Even against someone like Miles, you can be sure that your SP1 is going to hit, because the slow debuff, is going to go on before the unstoppable or evade would even trigger. In Miles' case, the evade would trigger because he gets those 2 extra charges. So that's one really good thing about that, and it doesn't need to hit in case you happen to whiff it. But I think it has really long, like across the screen range, because it does that really big dash. So against Angela here, gonna get up to an SP2 really soon to kind of show off the big damage it's capable of hitting. Hopefully I should be at all 15 durability when I actually land it for the maximum extra damage, and I am. Crit 10k followed up by a 7k physical, and the next hit did some really good stuff there too. Her SP2 is long, but I was able to get the trauma refresh there, the heavy attack. I can definitely see his SIG ability being almost necessary for counter rotations like this. Like, if I had to evade Angela's SP2 and then go in to use the heavy attack, I don't know if I'd have enough time without that 30% refresh. And I definitely wouldn't have enough if the SP2 didn't increase the duration by 100%. That's why I put the fracture part mixed in with the SP2, because you pretty much want to trigger the fracture on purpose. Right there, got hit by an SP2, so I lost it. My shield cooldown is still going because I did 2 traumas. So this is the 3rd cooldown here. The cooldown after this will be next to impossible to do. You can see just how long it starts to tick. Yeah, I was never going to get that back if I didn't use an SP3. I don't think I actually get up to an SP3 here, though. I'm going to try and keep this trauma up to the end of the fight. No, I didn't quite get up. I'll use an SP2 to finish her off. So overall, pretty good for a 6-2-6 fight as only a rank 3. So in general, I really liked Red Guardian. He offers a lot of variety to someone who is really similar to like Cap Infinity War. I think one thing I really overlooked was definitely the slow stopping all evade. Definitely something I keep forgetting that it does. But yeah, that's a really big utility in addition to the unstoppable, kind of where he shines away from Cap, being able to stop those. His trauma debuffs are nice. His SIG ability is super helpful for those though. In general though, I really enjoyed playing him. I don't think that he would necessarily serve a point on my team, but I can see for a lot of people that he would be a really good option. I showed off a lot of his damage here, but he does have the utility to back it up as well. So that's pretty much going to do it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully you found it informative. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.